one of the worst circumstances I've ever seen with a client come to me after they had lost a parent, and the parent had a lot of real estate and had for decades. When they started going through the process to take over running these properties, I discovered is that one of their sort of marquee buildings had a great triple net lease on it. It was like one of their hallmark buildings actually had the name of their uncle on it as well.
Okay.
The uncle had never been involved. The families were close, but not, and no one knew how that possibly could have happened. If you're not checking your deeds regularly and just making sure that everything is in line, there can be really bad repercussions later.
Here I am today, Pam Flitton with the Remax Fine Properties, and I am the host today of podcast Beyond the Listing, where I explore anything to do with real estate and everything related to that. And my guest today is Susan Jones. She is an attorney and managing partner and co-founding of Sorelle Wealth Partners. She's a wealth advisor and specializes in guiding high net worth people and guiding them through. Tell me what you guide people through, Susan. Yeah. Tell me a little bit
Well,
about
thank
what you do.
Yeah, thank you first for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So I work with individuals generally when they're facing a transition and then beyond, but whether that's a divorce, a loss of a spouse, getting close to retirement, or even selling a business, those are things that I love to help people through. And so, as you mentioned, I am a licensed attorney. Started out doing tax and estate planning, then moved over onto the tax side and was a partner at a really large accounting firm where I led the family office group. And then through that, then really got involved in wealth management. So I'm a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst as well. And so, as you mentioned, I started my own firm with a partner. And so we're love what I do. And always excited to talk to people who are interested.
I love that. So, how long have you been doing it?
So I've been working with families for about 25 years. I've been really focused on the wealth management side for probably the past 5 or 6 years. Although, again, there's a lot of overlap in the estate planning world and tax and financial planning. So I've actually been a CFP for since 2013. So
Well, that's great. How did you get into kind of transition into the one part into the other? Because I imagine being in this for so long that you get into the nitty gritty of everybody's life, right? If you're
yep.
doing divorcing and estate planning and helping with retirement, you get to know your people and
Yep.
their life circumstances. So tell me how you got into that.
Yeah, I love it that you asked that question. So my mom was a therapist and my dad was a financial planner. And I never really thought about that until kind of earlier in my career. And then as I progressed, I often would find myself, especially when I was on the tax side, that someone would come in and it would say, "Hey, Susan, I have a client, not someone that you work with, but they've had this thing happen." And oftentimes it was the divorce or loss of a spouse or even a job transition that brought a lot of vulnerabilities. And they would say, "Can you come and help me with this?" And what I realized is partly it was because I really like complex situations and I like problem solving and I like getting into the nitty gritty, but also having a strategic high level view. But also I was very comfortable with the vulnerabilities and the emotion that went along with that. And so sometimes it was someone who they felt a little bit uncertain about the technical aspect, but even more so, they felt uncomfortable about the fact that there might have to be like a Kleenex box on the table. Whereas I was completely fine with that, and so it made me realize that I really do enjoy both of that blend, and so often, again, it is because there's a life transition that's happening.
Yeah, I imagine that's gotta be fulfilling to be able to be with them through some of these
Yep,
circumstances, right? You get to know people, right? And
yep.
so it's not just a transactional deal for you, and I imagine they'll keep coming back to you time and time again. So you probably I like to believe I'm part of the family sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, that really is, and that's a big reason that together with my business partner, Sarah, we decided to start our own firm because we really did wanna have those deep long-term relationships with clients that we really connected with, so it's been a great thing.
Well, you said you started this about 5 years ago, your own firm with
No, we just started our own firm about a year
here
ago.
ago.
We were actually both shareholders at a much larger firm and then decided that we really wanted to have our own firm and again, really be able to focus on the clients that we felt like we brought the most value and that we really connected with.
Just to get into your business a little bit, and so spill the tea about that. How has that been for you in the past year and a half for you and having a partner in how you guys work together to help your clients?
Yeah, so it's been great. I think one thing so Sarah is my business partner, she's obviously not here, but she's wonderful and we're very like-minded, but we're also different in I think the best of ways. And it's funny, we worked together, we were both shareholders at a really large firm, but we didn't actually I had a lot of clients in the Fair Family Office group
Mhm.
and that also led the tax and estate planning. And then she had her own separate clients. So we interacted some, but it's not like we were serving the same clients together or that we were working together day to day. But we always admired each other. And so it's worked out beautifully because it really does turn out that again, when we were very like minded and who we wanted to help, what we thought were held to a fiduciary standard. And that was both really important to both of us. We don't sell products or things like that. And so that was also really important to us. But also, we do have a strong belief in, again, that combination of the technical, not just accuracy, but really going deep and doing really good work, but also the emotional and the behavioral side of it as well as being that non-judgmental, shame-free zone where clients are just comfortable to tell us anything. Because again, when you're dealing with those life transitions, there is that vulnerability and often a lot of times all kinds of emotions that are going on. So it's been honestly, it's been fabulous. It really has been like the best year of my life. I mean,
I
very candidly. Yeah.
I love that, and I think working for yourself, you're on that same level as the clients that you kinda work with, right? You yourself are going through a transitional part of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And years ago, I was divorced when I was 30, and I have the best ex-husband in the world. It was a very friendly divorce, but still, it did give me, and I've since remarried and had a bunch of kids, and it did give me some real empathy on kind of what that looks like as well.
Yeah, that's terrific. When that's terrific that you kinda I'm sorry, terrific is not the word, but it's great that you understand, some of the phases of the life that you help guide them through. Because I imagine it is a kind of a guide through to say this is what you need to do. Congratulations on a healthy relationship now. That was an odd way to say it, but there you go. So what inspired the and we just talked about that. Property and cash flow. How should investors evaluate true cash flow and when should their wealth be tied up in a property? So let's say I've got some money and so this is a very important thing for me. When should they start using the money that they have on a property? Right.
Yeah, and so I should have also mentioned that I love working with real estate investors, and I have throughout my career. And I've worked with real estate developers, real estate, more passive investing, and also a lot of my clients just love having vacation houses and things like that. So, but the cash flow, I think, dynamic is really interesting. And one of the things I always start by saying is that I think everyone needs to have a really good financial plan. And that informs a lot of when you're thinking about cash flow and what's coming in from the real estate. One of the things I've seen repeatedly throughout my career is, first of all, people who start investing in real estate, what I found is that they love real estate. And so then it could be hard to get them to do anything else with their cash because they love their real estate. And that is not a bad problem to have, except when they get themselves in a position where their balance sheet looks great, but all of a sudden they have an unexpected expense, whether it's with the business or personally, and they don't have the cash flow to support that
Sure.
because they've put everything back into an illiquid asset. So I think when you're the first thing to do is just make sure that you have that backup cash supply both for the business and for yourself personally. And so whether that means the business, you would always want to make sure for the real estate, you always want to make sure you do have some kind of cash set aside that if you have a tenant, for example, who you have unexpected occupancy issues, that you have enough cash flow that you can support the operating expenses for that time frame. If there's a storm and you have a roof that has an issue that isn't covered by insurance. So things like that, you just want to make sure that you have that. But then after that, I think then it is looking at ROI, and to the extent that you have cash flow and you either want to put it back into real estate or make improvements on existing real estate, then it's what's the return of that going to be net of taxes, which is often missed.
I believe that you should never be hanging on by your fingernails, right?
Yeah. No.
You should be diversified. And as much as I love real estate, and I think people should always have it, you should be diversified, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
It's just an opinion, but I think real estate is a great place to put your money, and it is a long term, but if that's your only thing and you don't have the cash flow, if you're just again hanging on by your fingernails, maybe you should spread it out a little bit. I tell my clients all the time, yeah, that you have to think about if, again, if you don't have tenants or if the dishwasher breaks or some such thing as that, you have to make sure that you're going to have that money and you need to make sure because something is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So you have to think about these things, but I'm very diversified in what we hold, right? And thankfully,
Yes,
we
great.
have somebody that's smart enough to say, "This is what you need to do." So,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
agree
and I
with
think I love that you brought up, yeah, the diversification, because whether that's your investment portfolio or real estate, diversification and concentration risk are
Mhm.
very real.
Right.
And I always joke with clients that if there's not one aspect of your financial life, whether it's your portfolio or your real estate, that you're not a little bit disappointed in, then that means you're not diversified. Because at any given time, and that really is how you hedge yourself against things like down markets. Again, whether it's with real estate, even thinking through, do you want all of your real estate on one block? What happens to that if there's a storm on that one block? And really thinking through, again, truly making sure that you are diversified.
Yeah. I think real estate is one of the best places to put your money because I think the what you make year over end is probably one of your better places to put it, but it's more of a long-term hold. But
Yeah.
so what are the
A lot of it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, the other thing, Pam, that I always talk to clients about is also what is your risk profile and how. So, for people who don't mind having a little bit more of an active role in how they're investing and they're holding real estate is great. But I do always say to people, like, how would you feel if you held that going to bed at night? And so those that I've seen do the best in real estate are like, oh yeah, it doesn't bother me that I have this real estate that I. And so I just want to say that's part of it too. There is always that mental component because even whether it's bonds or stocks or real estate or Bitcoin, whatever it is that crypto, whatever it is that just does that fit with your risk profile?
Yeah. Are you going to be great that you just said that? Or how are you going to be with it when you go to bed at night? How about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
simply.
So what are the biggest hidden tax consequences that catch everyday real estate investors off guard?
Yeah, I think the when you go to sell a property, and oftentimes what I see, there's two things in particular. The first is that often it's easy to forget that all that great depreciation that you were able to take and deduct against your income does come back in one way or another when you sell the property if it's at a gain. And one of the things that I keep reading about and having clients send me articles about is the short-term rental and the ability to do cost segregation studies and take bonus depreciation and have like big loss in year one, which there's a lot. We could spend a whole episode on that. And of course, all these articles don't go into the nitty-gritty of how that works. But there are a lot of great. Also, I want to say they're oftentimes publicized as a tax loophole or a tax workaround because that makes it sound sexy and neat. But it's been in the code for decades that short-term rentals are treated a certain way, and all of this. It's all very, and for the most part, as long as you're following the rules, fine with the IRS. There are rules you have to meet, of course.
Sure.
But what people forget is that when you take that depreciation, that later on it does adjust your basis. And particularly if you're taking depreciation on personal property. So if you do get that cost seg study and you're depreciating the carpet and the appliances and the cabinets and all of that at a faster rate, then when you sell, you're going to have depreciation recapture. And so for that, again, that personal property, that's going to be at ordinary income tax rates. And then any building or structural components are generally going to be at a 25% rate. Again, oftentimes you're able to get the benefit of the deduction at a higher income tax marginal rate. But then it's really easy to forget that just because you bought that building for $1 million doesn't mean that when you go to sell it, your basis is $1 million because you had the benefit of that depreciation. So just making sure that when you're, again, doing that ROI and thinking through that you're calculating that. And also taking into account, does it make sense to do a 1031 exchange? The second thing that I see people forget, and I'm in Florida, and so it's very easy to forget that there are states that have income tax. And so oftentimes I see real estate investors and developers who live in either a low or a no income tax state
Text.
to forget that yeah, yep, Texas. And so it's easy for us to forget that if you own a property in California, you're going to be paying possibly up to 12% in tax on your California real estate. And so that's just, again, something to keep in mind because it's when you buy, sometimes can be easy to forget that when you sell it, that you have to pay tax in that state, even if you've been paying tax on the rental income the whole time.
That's where somebody like you would come in real handy to be able to talk these things through with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times I'm a huge fan of multi-year tax projections, and I obviously do a lot of tax planning, but even when thinking through like a 1031 exchange, I one time had a client come to me and he had some vacation properties and he had an opportunity to buy some really good property in Colorado and wanted to offload some properties in Missouri. And so he was very excited to do a 1031 exchange. And so we started looking at it and going down that path. It turned out that for various reasons, he was actually going to have much lower income that year than he generally had. Part of it was because of some depreciation he was able to take on some other properties. And but we started looking at it, it was like your effective rate this year is going to be only around 20%. And so maybe not knowing many years you're at the 37% bracket, so rather than doing a 1031 exchange, it might just make sense to go ahead and sell and take the tax hit now when you're at a lower rate. And so that is what he ended up doing. But it's one of those things, again, if you're just like reading on the internet and talking to friends, the 1031 exchange, it sounds miraculous and it really can be beneficial, but only if the tax impacts make sense and you've actually run that out and analyzed the numbers.
Yeah. It's amazing what Mr. Google can tell you and what a real professional can tell you.
It is. Yeah, and a lot of times the raw information is great and it's a good way to start thinking about things, but Google doesn't know you. Even ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your favorite AI is these days doesn't get it right.
Yeah, no, they honestly haven't went to school. So how can owners proactively structure real estate today to avoid costly tax surprises? Because we don't want the government to get more of our money, right? Less. Not that we don't love the government.
Yep.
We just don't want them to have more of our money. And they want it,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. In terms of structuring, so structuring, I think a lot of times people think, oh, if I just structure it, it's going to have a really beneficial tax impact. But the structure itself with real estate doesn't usually matter that much. And so the structure is more about liability protection and making sure that you're putting your properties in those limited liability companies and then really making sure you're following through on the rules. And that's something that I think oftentimes gets missed as well. Going back to the internet again, it's great that it's an easy, quick, usually inexpensive process to set up an LLC. But what happens is people set them up, and even if they put the title into the LLC, then they forget about the other things that they really should do, such as getting a separate bank account for the LLC,
Yeah.
making sure the insurance is titled correctly and includes the LLC, all of those things that at the end of the day, if there is an issue, that you're covered from a risk perspective. and reviewing the title every few years. One of the worst circumstances I've ever seen with a client, I had a client come to me after they had lost a parent, and the parent had a lot of real estate and had for decades. That had been their career, was being a real estate developer and investor. And when they started going through the process to take over running these properties, they did title checks on all of them and were doing that. And what they discovered is that one of their sort of marquee buildings had a great triple net lease on it. It was like the one of their hallmark buildings actually had the name of their uncle on it as
Mm.
well.
Okay.
And the uncle had never been involved. The families were close, but not, and no one knew how that possibly could have happened because, again, there was no sign that. So they actually started a legal proceeding in order to remove the uncle from the property. And the uncle also, though, was deceased. So the uncle was deceased, the father was deceased, and so there was no one that knew how this had happened. And so when they served the papers to the surviving aunt, it upset her so badly that she actually had a heart
Oh,
attack. And it created this huge, it was like the worst situation. And so it's a very dramatic story, but it's true. And my point is, if you're not checking your deeds regularly and just making sure that everything is in line, there can be really bad repercussions later. And I've seen smaller things where someone thought it had been transferred and it hadn't, or there was a gift made, but the product didn't transfer. There's a lot of smaller stories, but that's the one that in my mind was like, wow, if you don't do anything, this is what could happen. And then on the tax side, there's again like the big issues that get missed. So like missed 1031 exchange opportunities, things like that. But what I see more often is little incremental things that get missed that add up over time. And a lot of that sometimes has to do with tracking expenses. And so we all know it's so easy to just sometimes you're in a rush and you think, oh, instead of sending it for my LLC, I'm just going to pay it from my personal account this one time. Or I bought this property, but I don't have the LLC set up yet or my bank account set up yet. So I'm going to go ahead and pay for that. Or just things that kind of slip through. Or even you're driving around and you're not looking at your mileage, things like that. So I feel like there's those little opportunities that just making sure that you are really diligent about setting up those bank accounts, tracking expenses, working with an accountant who can help you with the record keeping and the tax reporting.
yeah. I think tracking expensive and those things are the hardest thing. I know that is in my business,
Yep.
in keeping things separate personally and from the LLC. That's in tax times the worst time ever.
Yeah. Yes, yes, and it is for so many people, and even me, I find myself like, "Oh, next week we're gonna have a open house at one of our offices, and I'm at Target buying stuff for the kids," and I think, "Oh, I could just pick up some napkins while I'm here." Things like that happen all the time, and it's so then easy to forget about it and to not reimburse yourself properly and to not go through all of those things, so.
Yeah. I know I still have things on my personal credit card that should have been changed over to my business card years ago. And I'm like, oh, I need to do that. I need to do that. I need to do that. It just makes me so sad.
Oh, I know, and everyone does it, but also
Yeah.
just keep in mind that if you do put something on your personal card, you can always reimburse yourself. Now, I still think it's really important to go through the process of actually having your receipt, submitting your receipt, having a process for that so that the IRS would ever challenge it, but it's not too late. Again, a lot of that substance over form can be fixed, but it's just a matter of actually doing it before you file your taxes.
It is true. Ugh, taxes, it makes me shudder.
Yeah, when I used to tell people I was a tax attorney, I swear sometimes they would back up. "Oh, why would you ever do that?"
But you don't sound like a tax attorney, so it's okay.
That's good.
So, maximizing estate plans. What are the most effective ways families can maximize the legal and financial benefits of real estate?
So it used to be, and I'm going to date myself here, when I first started practicing law, the estate tax exemption. We still have an estate tax in the United States, and that applies to when you have a net worth over a certain amount. and it's currently at the 40% rate. It's always been at a really high rate. And when I first started practicing law many years ago, that threshold was like $675,000. So I used to joke that if you had a house with no mortgage and life insurance and a retirement account, you probably had an estate tax issue even back then. Now it's $15 million per person. And so there's been a lot, obviously, of growth with that. So the number of people that are actually subject to the estate tax, it's very different than it used to be. And so now when you're thinking through the estate tax consequences, it's really important to consider, am I possibly going to be in that 15 million if I'm married $30 million range? Or am I going to be low enough that there's no way, even if markets do great and my real estate gets top dollar, that I'm not going to be at that level? Because the trade off when you start planning generally for the estate tax is that you give up income tax benefits. And that's why there's a lot of plans out there that were drafted for people, especially pre 2012, that era, where it's geared more toward protecting from the estate tax. And so I would say anyone who's listening that has estate planning documents from like 2012 or before and you haven't looked at it in a while, especially if you're married, go back and take a look, because it could be set up in a way that you're giving up income tax benefits. And what I mean by that is that anything that stays in your estate at death gets a basis step up. And no, I should say a basis adjustment. And the reason I say that is because property that you own when you die, the basis that goes to the person who inherits the property is the fair market value at the date of death. Now, generally, when things are working like we hope they do, that means that you have appreciated assets. And so that unrealized gain goes away. But there are situations where there are people who died during COVID, for example, where all of a sudden we had a month or so where everything just really went down significantly, where maybe unfortunately the basis then becomes lower than the purchase price. But that does apply to real estate as well, even if it's a 1031 exchange property. And so that's another thing, if especially if someone is listening and they have maybe a parent who owns a lot of real estate, who is older and maybe even has an illness. What I sometimes see is people sell real estate in before death and then pay a gain that, had they just waited for a few months, rented that property for another year or two, that unrealized gain would have gone away. I know death time tax planning can sometimes sound a little morbid, but it's just one of those realities that, again, it's just as we're looking ahead and projecting, it's, I think, important to consider what does that look like. And so certainly we don't want to miss an opportunity to at least consider.
That's that there again is having a professional guide you through that is when they need somebody like you. The next step is, what are the biggest mistakes people make during a divorce or the sudden loss of a spouse? I guess they kind of go hand in hand. It's just a quick.
Yeah. So, and this is a really important question, especially when we're talking about real estate. So I think that one of the number one mistakes that happen in both of those situations is wanting to keep the house, or thinking you want to keep the house no matter what. And so oftentimes with divorce, it's a matter of, I want to keep the house. My family, I raised my kids here. I just can't do it right now. And then as we look down the line, and turns out that from just an overall financial plan perspective, it's not going to work, or it's going to make enough loss of flexibility and freedom
Yeah.
that the house no longer is something. And when someone has lost a spouse, often I hear, you know what? Yeah, there's just too much change. I have too much to do. I'm just going to wait a little bit and then sell the house. And again, we never want to like lead with tax or do things that feel really bad because of tax. But on the same hand, oftentimes there's an opportunity, either if you're getting divorced while you're still married, or even if you have a spouse that has passed away, you have a little bit of time that you could sell the house and take advantage of the $500,000 gain exclusion that married couples get, as opposed to the $250,000 exemption that single individuals get. And so that can have really significant tax consequences. So, in other words, if someone's getting divorced and they're like, oh, I really want to keep the house, it means everything. And then 2 years later, they're like, either I can't afford the house, or it turns out I really want to travel and move, and all of a sudden I don't need the house anymore. Now they're essentially going to pay tax on an additional $250,000 of gain if they have had significant appreciation in that piece of property.
Oh, that's good to know, whether to do it at the beginning or to do is most people, I feel like maybe at the beginning of the situation that, and they may not be thinking as clearly as maybe post than at the beginning. That's an awesome, good way to think of it. How do you specifically guide women to take confident ownership of their property?
Yeah. So a lot of times we see with women that either they haven't been engaged as, I always call it, the main character.
Mhm.
And so even if sometimes I have clients that come to me and they say, when I was married, I always was included in the meeting with the
Mhm.
financial planner or with the tax professional or with the lawyer, but no one really asked my opinion, or like I wasn't the one that was the decision maker. And but then we also have women who come to us and they say, my husband was really the one that had all these relationships and I was never even included. I was never kept informed. And sometimes it was on purpose. Other times it was because the reality of life is that we're all just trying to be efficient. And so just my husband takes out the garbage and I cook. Sometimes it's, hey, he deals with the finances and I deal with home maintenance or whatever it is. So, yeah, I just want to be clear there. That's not always something that's a bad act, but the consequences are similar in that it really can make someone feel like they don't know how to do their financial life. And so that's really where we come in, and we even have some kind of behavioral coaching methods that we use in order to find out where someone is with that and then help them as we're going through the process to gain that confidence to ask questions and to feel like they can understand it. Because again, it's just like anything else. Pam, I'm not in real estate. And so there's a lot of things about real estate that I don't know. And so I'm going to need a professional to help me. But also, I feel confident that I can ask questions and I don't have to be the expert. I just have to know enough that that I know what decisions are going to align with my values. And that's really the same with your financial life. And so I think, especially women, we have a tendency to think that if we don't know it all, we don't know anything. And that's somehow compounded when it is dealing with something financial. And so it can end up really having women who are very smart and very competent. And there's a lot of evidence of that, but they still feel very kind of small and insecure when it comes to their finances.
Sure. I know right now, I don't know the finances right now, and
Yeah.
it's not because I'm not included, it's because I don't want
Yeah.
to know.
Yep. And that's not uncommon. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's, again, a lot of things. My husband gets like the car worked on, like, I don't want to know. Just I'm just glad he did it. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, see, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, and for some reason, oftentimes we see men just don't feel that way. So even if I have one client in particular that it really is the wife that is the driver of the financial discussions. But when the husband wants to ask a question, he feels he's not confident about it. So there is, I think, and again, I hate to generalize too much because obviously there's men and women on both
Yep.
sides of the confidence. But I do just see it more with women that for whatever reason, if they don't really feel like they know a lot, they have a tendency to think, oh,
Yes,
there's a lot of,
I just don't know anything.
yeah,
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 absolutely. See, I know, like I said, I just don't want to know. It's not that
yeah.
I can't learn. I just don't know right now because I don't have to. At some point, I'm sure I will. But numbers are not my thing. At- my strength lies someplace else. And
Yeah.
so you'll do specific guidance and you'll train them through and so they'll know enough.
Absolutely, and that's really what it is. It's if you think about it as like the doctor, they're not gonna show you the X-rays and make you figure it out yourself. A good doctor is going to put something together, they're gonna show you what it is, they're gonna explain it in ways that's very understandable, and then talk you through options, and that's really what we do.
Yeah, so they're able to make informed decisions. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, it's
love that. Why is it so critical that financial and real estate advice empowers rather than intimidates. I think we just spoke about that a little bit. I do feel like so many people are intimidated by finance. And I think maybe because most people feel like I don't have enough, right? I just don't have enough, especially on retirement and retirement. I don't have enough to retire. I didn't start soon enough. Can we talk a little bit about that? When is a good time to start? When is it ever too late to start?
Yeah. So it's never too late. When's the best time? As soon as you can. Though just the math involved with compounding is incredible. And so if you start, even if it's just a little tiny bit when you're in your 20s and 30s, it is amazing the difference it makes by the time that you get into your 60s or so. But it's never too late. And I think what I see a lot of times with retirement is that even for people who have really been pretty diligent and consistent about it, they have no idea if it's going to support them in retirement. And I actually had a client come to me and she had been working really hard. She had bought a house and had a rental property, but she really didn't think she was ever going to be able to retire because in her mind, even though she was like saving and doing different things, it was in mostly retirement accounts. And so she never felt like she had a bunch of extra cash. And when we put together her plan, it turned out that actually she was doing great in terms of being able to retire, but she was actually contributing too much to her retirement
Mm,
plan. And she had a company match, which is great. But then really, so the advice ended up being, hey, you need to actually, again, make sure you get the match, keep contributing, but for the next couple years, take that money and put it into a taxable investment account so that you do actually have money that you can access because she was not taking vacations that she really wanted to do, even questioning things like on her, what's it called when you get your free books for Kindle Unlimited or whatever it's called, these little things that it's like of course you can afford that. But it was again just from a cash flow and a savings perspective that she felt like she didn't have that being able to
wasn't
access.
living life.
Yeah, so she wasn't living
Yeah.
life. And again, when we ran the numbers and she had never married and didn't have children, and it's like there's no reason to have a whole bunch at the end if you're really not living your life when you're in. And she's 50, and it's the best time to make sure that you're having all the
Yeah,
fun.
you can't take it with you. So, like I said, I think there's so many people that just think they don't have enough and they're so intimidated by it that they're afraid to start, right?
Yep.
I don't have enough. I don't make enough, not enough.
Yeah.
So they just don't start, which is
Yeah.
and I'm like, just do it. If you just
Right.
do it, it's going to buy that house. Even
Yep.
if you start at a 200, $300,000 house, your next one's going to be 400 or 500, right? And that's
Absolutely.
going to how you start building your wealth.
Yeah, and really buying real estate. In fact, even just when I think about myself personally, so back when I was getting out of law school, I got a job and I bought my first house. And my first house cost $98,000. But I had read this article that said that in order to buy your second house, you had to buy your first house first.
Yes.
And it went through the benefits of buying real estate and just the benefit of basically using leverage to get that appreciation. So even though I didn't have my $98,000 in cash because I was able to get a loan, then I sold it 2 years later for $130,000. I had painted it and made it cute, but that really was the stepping stone to buying real estate in the future. And I know that unfortunately, houses have gotten more expensive since then, of course. And I know it's harder to get into that first house, but I think that a lot of those principles still apply,
Yep.
that the benefits of being able to do that does. So instead of waiting until you get your dream house, thinking about buying your first house first.
Yeah. So mine was a $60,000 HUD home at 9%, and we had a newborn baby.
There you go.
But we sold it at 90,000 and then we went to the second one and the third one and the
Yeah.
fourth one. And but yeah, 60,000, 9% interest and a newborn.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
just a stepping stone.
Yeah. When I was practicing law, I worked with an attorney who I really considered a mentor. She was wonderful. But she told me one time we were going to see a client, we got in her car and it was new. And I was like, oh, I love your car. And she said, I just did the thing that people talk about that I thought wouldn't happen to me. And she said, I this car cost more or about the same as my first house. And so I haven't bought a car yet that was more than my first house, but in my mind, I'm like, if I live long enough, I guess that's going to happen.
Because you can't. A decade from now, how do you think wealth management industry will evolve? Where do you think
So
we're going?
that's Yeah, so that's so interesting. I think one of the things that has already happened is that for many people, myself included, it used to be that anyone who was managing money, there were teams of analysts that would look at different stocks and look at different individual holdings and things like that. And then it really shifted to, for again, a lot of us, there are still active managers, but I am a strong believer in the market's efficient. It's impossible to time the market successfully long term, and it's important to have low cost, very transparent investments. And so right now already there's so much information and software and AI that I have an investment team that I partner with, but for they have about 6 billion under management, and they have an investment team of 7 people, and they're all really smart. And 10, 15 years ago to do that would have required a much more robust team. But now, because of data and software and AI, they're able to be very efficient. And so there's already a move that the actual investing component of wealth management is not this, it's really important, but it doesn't require like all these people to do it. It just, again, the data's out there.
Yeah.
And even in terms of financial advice, so I think one of the big things that wealth managers and people are talking about now is there going to be a time when you don't need a financial advisor. And I don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. I suspect that there can be a bot that looks and talks and thinks like me. But right now, at least, and I think really for the foreseeable future, again, there you can get a lot of good raw data. There's a lot of efficiencies in terms of when we're doing plans that already it's a lot more efficient. But there still is that really human component that
Mhm.
we need. And it's both on the behavioral side and having someone that really understands you and can support you and can be that sounding board, but also then can take the information and apply it to your situation, and then that critical thinking, and then run it by you, work with you through that. And, it's interesting, and I love AI, but it's amazing. Still, it gets a lot of technical things wrong, especially on the tax and financial side. But also, it doesn't have that context. And so, a lot of times, what it recommends or what it will tell people to do is not at all aligned with how they want to live their life. And so, again, having a person that can help you through that.
Yes.
Now, will that change in 25 years? I don't know. But I think at least for the next decade, that's where we're going to be.
I think you're always going to have people that are transactional, and then you're always going to have people that need people, right?
Yeah.
And so you're always going to have the relational people. I myself don't like bots,
Yeah.
but I'm a hugger, so I need
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So when I get a bot, it annoys me. I need a real person I can talk to, and
Yeah.
generally, I use AI to write things for me. But that's
Yeah.
just me personally. My husband uses AI for everything, and it excites him. But he's a nerd, and
Yeah.
but I do think AI and all those things are going to be so much more with it. But I think people need people like us.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah. No, I agree.
because they need relational things, because it's coming into every part of us, and there everybody talks about it's coming into real estate, and people are going to be using bots for real estate, but it's never going to replace us, so they'll
Yes.
never replace
Yeah.
you as well.
Yeah.
So if people were going to find you, where would they go?
Mhm. So visit our website, Sorelle Wealth Partners. So Sorelle, wealthpartners.com.
Okay.
Or you can reach out to me directly at Susan, Susan, at Sorelle, SORELLE, WP.com.
All right, and they can also find you on LinkedIn at Susan Ruford?
Wofford.
Rufford,
Mhm.
okay. And that is Wofford, Jones.
That's right.
Yeah. You have a website and LinkedIn. And personally, they can find you. Where is that again?
Oh, but they could reach out to me directly at Susan at SorelleWP.com.
That's awesome. Susan, I really appreciate you coming on to my podcast today, Beyond the Listing. Are a wealth of information. And I think if you guys need, can you do business throughout the states or is it just in Florida? So, anyway,
Yep, anywhere. Yep, and I do have clients all over the country.
that's terrific. So, anywhere that you're looking to do wealth management or to find out where you need to put your money, they can give you a call.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, and support the little businesses. And she's new, starting her, not new in the business, but new starting her business. So give her a try and contact her and see what you guys can do together and build your wealth as far and let her help you out. But I appreciate you coming on today and talking with us. And you're a wealth of information.
Well, thank you, Pam. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, let's do this again. I'd love to have you back on the podcast and see what else we can talk about.
Sounds great.
All right, have a good day.
Thanks to you too.
There's always more happening beyond the listing. Stick around and catch the next episode for real talk and insights that help you move smarter and farther in real estate.